Story time about how my bully set me up to have me essayed and tried to starve me. And this is my own story time. I was in school, I was a total pushover. You guys, I never defended myself. Instead, my brothers and sisters would defend me all the time, which is why I say my brothers and sisters are my best friends now. Anytime boys would bother me, my twin brother would be right there to defend me. And anytime a girl bothered me, my sister would literally fight for me. So I had this bully in school. I'm gonna call her B. B was the queen bee. All the boys and all the girls would do whatever she wanted. She was funny, she was charming, and she made everyone laugh. So I understand why she was popular in our class. But how can everybody do what one girl said? I mean, the power she wielded over these boys. B was new to our school, and I could tell that she did not like me right away. In fact, I could hear her talking bad about me sometimes in class. And then when I looked at her, she would pretend like she was talking about somebody else. But nonetheless, she became friends with some of the girls that I was kind of friends with. By the way, I got bullied by almost everyone in my year, especially the girls. So one day, B invites me and the rest of the girls over to her house. But little did I know that she had invited a boy to essay me. Part 2 is up. But that's when I realized she invited a boy to essay me. After school, we all get dropped off at her house. And nobody was home. Like, her mom wasn't even there, nobody was there. Although her little sister was there. Her little sister was only a year younger than us, but she wasn't that much younger. Her sister was a saint. She was super nice and kind. Right away when we got to her house, she tried to separate me from the group. First, I didn't know why she was doing that until I saw a boy. Let's call him William. Funny thing is that these people actually tried to follow me on Instagram, but I blocked them. Anyway, William literally came out of the shadows. Like, he was already in the house. Creepy. Anyway, everyone in class knew that William had a crush on me, which is why I used to stay away from him. So as soon as I saw him, my stomach dropped. That's when B tells me to go to the garage, and I needed to go get something for her. I walk with her to the garage, and William walks in too. Out of nowhere, she runs away and locks the door, leaving me and William alone. Instantly, I was afraid. Tried to talk to me, but then tried to kiss me right away. I kept turning my face and didn't want to. He tried to grab my you-know-what. And that's when he tried grabbing my you-know-what. Kept pushing his hand away while he was trying to stick his tongue down my throat. The whole thing was incredibly disgusting. Mind you, I'm 13 at the time. And I push him away really hard and start banging on the door. And it opens the door, and everyone that was invited was listening through the door. And they all started cackling like it was hilarious what had just happened to me. Me, on the other hand, I was crying. I called my mom and asked her to pick me up. But my mom couldn't come right away. It would be like another hour before she could. William left and I felt much better. B then gave me a half-ass apology, which I look back and I'm like, at least she did, but still not cool. That's when she starts offering everyone food except for me. She warmed up tortillas and scrambled eggs and made everyone a plate, except for me. She looked at me and said, oh, there isn't enough for everybody. That's when her little sister comes up to her and says, stop being so mean, give her food. Her sister took me to the kitchen, warmed me up a tortilla and some of the leftover eggs. I sat down there with her sister and we both ate together. After that, her sister and I became friends. But B was so mad that her sister gave me food. They even got into a huge fight in front of us. Moral of the story, if your bully ever invites you over, just don't go. I have so many more personal stories. Should I do more? Story time about how my father bribed my boyfriend to not break up with me. Disclaimers, not my story time, it's on my Instagram. Unfortunately, I have a lot of anxiety and I'm a very, very shy person. So it's always been hard for me to find friends and even harder to date men. I'm 37 and I've only ever been on one date. I come from a Latin family and this is unforgivable to them. Since I turned 20, my family has always asked me every single day of my life when I'm gonna find a man. As you can imagine, this adds even more to my anxiety because I just feel extremely pressured. Remember that one date I went on? Well, that was actually set up through my parents. I was 25 years old and my mom started getting personal training. Her personal trainer is the one she set up the date with. And this guy was a nightmare. He was rude to the waiters of the restaurant we went to, and immediately after that, I just left. I didn't even give him a second chance. As you can imagine, my parents were furious. My mom actually told me that she wanted me to marry this guy, and I was like, have you met him? I've always been completely misunderstood. Fast forward to me being 37. I landed my dream job in New York City and I moved away from home. I was happy being independent and moving away from my parents. I even lost my virginity and I was happy about it. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my father bribed my boyfriend to not break up with me. Disclaimers, not my story time, it's on Instagram. Finally lost my virginity at 37 years old. I was living by myself in New York City and I had finally moved away from my toxic parents. But my parents would call me every single day. And guess what they would ask? Did you finally meet someone at work? Apparently, I was about to meet somebody at work that I would marry. But this is how I met the guy I lost my virginity to. At work. I guess my parents were right. I work in fashion and marketing and every day I went to work I had to dress up really well. And it was fun. Again, for the first time in my life I was coming out of my shell. One of the editors at my job started noticing me. He invited me out to coffee and told me he wanted to show me the ropes. This was the first time that I found myself really attracted to a man. As you can imagine, I was so down. Ended up going to a bar and having wine together. After that, everything is a blur. I know that I kissed him and he kissed me back. That's when he asked me to go on a second date. And on the second date, we did it. I ended up losing my virginity and I called my parents and told them. This actually made them very happy. But now they said I had to marry the guy. But guess what? This guy wanted to be my boyfriend. And we started dating. But then I found something out. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my dad bribed my boyfriend to not break up with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's on me on Instagram. But that's when I found out that my boyfriend was bi. One day he just tells me that he's attracted to men. At this point, we'd been together for 6 months. This obviously broke my heart because he didn't tell me before. And also, my parents would never accept that. This man was basically asking me for an open relationship. He even told me that I should consider myself lucky that he didn't go cheat on me. This all rubbed me the wrong way. Even though I was in love with him, I knew that I couldn't accept that. But at my age, can I really afford to say no to a man? I finally ended up telling him that I don't think I would be comfortable with an open relationship. He instantly broke up with me. I called my parents to tell him and they were upset. That's when my father took it upon himself to call my boyfriend and tell him that he would pay him $6,000 to stay with me. And guess what my boyfriend did? This man accepted. He took $6,000 and stayed with me for another year. Exactly a year later on Christmas, my father tells me that I should be grateful to him. When I asked him why, he said, well, I paid him to stay with you. And you're happy now, aren't you? Should I break up with my boyfriend and break ties with my family? Story time about how my mother-in-law accused me of cheating on her son. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's not on my Instagram. My evil mother-in-law is the worst of the worst. The moment I started dating her perfect little son, she would make judgmental comments on my body, and if I was ever in the kitchen cooking, she would be there to try to criticize everything that I would do. When my husband and I finally got pregnant, she pretended to be happy. I could see deep down inside she was hating the fact that I was pregnant. I think she always had the hope that he would leave me. But let me give you some background info on my husband. This man is lucky to be with me. Not only am I a 12, I am so kind and caring to him, and I have way too much patience for him. Whereas my mother-in-law thinks that he's the one lucky to be with me. First off, I make way more money than my husband, so I'm the one paying for most of the bills. But guess what? My husband asked me not to tell his mom about that because he'd be embarrassed. He also doesn't know how to cook or clean. And guess why? Because his mother did everything for him growing up. So I'm the one that has to cook, clean, and pay for the bills. A few months ago, I asked my husband for a divorce. He ran over to his mom's house and tried to get her to convince me not to. But guess what? His mom called me and told me that she'd convince him to give me a divorce. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my mother-in-law accused me of cheating on her son. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's sent me on Instagram. So instead of her trying to convince me not to leave him, she told me that she would convince my husband to break up with me. This was all for my benefit because I was the one that wanted a divorce. But 2 weeks later, I find out I'm pregnant. At the time, we were still living in the same house, but we weren't really talking. So I finally went up to him and told him that I was pregnant. He was so happy. You think he even gave me a hug or a kiss? No, he picked up the phone and called his mother right away. He called her on speaker and I could hear what she was saying. And as soon as he told her, she said, "It's probably not your kid." How could I have not seen this coming? At this point, she thought we were gonna get a divorce. So me having a kid was the worst case scenario for her. Right away, she told him to kick me out of the house that I pay for. That's when I grabbed the phone from him and I started telling her everything. First off, I told her that I paid for all the bills and that her son made only $200 a week from a stupid gaming thing and that he wasn't even bothering to look for another job. And then on top of paying for the bills, I still had to cook and clean. And I asked her, "Do you really think this is the kind of man I want to have a kid with?" She had no response. That's when she hung up the phone and told my husband to go over to her house. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my mother-in-law accused me of cheating on her son. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's not on Instagram. When I broke the news to her that he didn't pay for any of the bills and that I was paying for the house, she literally lost her shit. My husband hung up the phone and told me that he would never speak to me again. God, if only that were true. Then he goes over to his mom's house and guess what? An hour later, he demands I go over to her house to apologize to his mother. I said that I would, but instead, I went over there and told her some more truths. I ended up telling her that her son told me not to tell her that he didn't make any money, and that the whole time he and I were together, she thought that he was paying for all the bills. Then I said, "Aren't you embarrassed that your son is like that?" That's when she told me the only way she would accept my child was with a paternity test. Am I supposed to do that with the baby in my belly? Finally, the baby was born and I was able to prove that it was his son. My husband wants us to stay together, but his mom keeps criticizing me. Every time she sees the kid, she says it doesn't look like my husband, even though I already proved that it was his. I think that I should get a divorce. I'm afraid my mother-in-law might do something to the baby. My husband thinks I'm just overreacting. What should I do?